All right. Hey, good evening, everybody. It is Thursday, September the 29th, 2022. This is the last day of the doing the Thursday pre-recordings where I'm teaching the other class at 4:30. So right now, actually, I'm pushing it real close. It's 4 o'clock right now because we were having some computer glitches. The camera wasn't picking up. So I'm gonna have to move through this to be ready for my class at 4. But anyway. Good afternoon. Today we are going to finish chapter 21 of Isaiah. And the title of today's daily manna is "The Sustenance, Security, and the Glory That This World Offers Won't Last Long." Like there may be occasional sustenance, there may be feelings of security, moments of glory, but it's not going to last long. It doesn't compare to what the Lord offers. So let's reread through Isaiah 21. The burden of the desert by the sea. As windstorms sweep over the south, so it comes from the desert, a terrifying land. A harsh vision has been shown to me. The traitor betrays and the plunderer plunders. Go up, Elam, besiege Media. I have put an end to all her groaning. Therefore my body is filled with pain. Pangs have taken hold of me, like the pangs of a woman in labor. I am bewildered by what I hear, terrified by what I see. My heart is bewildered. Terror overwhelms me. The twilight I longed for has turned into trembling. So the prophet sees this doom that's coming as there's an attempt to build alliances with Babylon and to build alliances, to look again for our hope elsewhere, to this desert by the sea. And while the prophet is grieved, of course, what we also see is the people continuing to be complacent, continuing to just do their own thing and to, hey, we've got our own solution. Set the table, spread out the cloth, eat, drink. Rise up, you princes, oil the shield. For Adonai has said to me, go post a watchman. Let him declare what he sees. Let him declare what's revealed. When he sees a chariot with a pair of horsemen, riders on donkeys, riders on camels, let him pay attention, very close attention. Again, what we had there was basically pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, kashuv, 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 over and over and over again. Verse 8, then he cried out like a lion upon the watchtower, Adonai, I stand continually in the daytime and stay at my post every night. Look, here comes a chariot of men with a pair of horsemen. Then one answered and said, fallen, fallen is Babylon. All the images of her gods are broken on the ground. Everything now the watchman, Isaiah being the watchman here, is watching for what he sees, and he sees at some point a victory coming, a victorious messenger, declaring that Babylon, the system of this world is fallen, and all the images, all the statues that are of her nothingness, of her idols, are broken on the ground. O my people, crushed on the threshing floor, what I heard from Adonai Tzevaot, God of Israel, I have declared to you. Continues in verse 11, which we looked at yesterday, the burden of Duma, meaning it's a Duma being a place, an oasis, but it's also the burden of silence. He says, one calls to me from Seir, from Edom, watchman, what is left of the night? Watchman, what is left of the night? How much longer? Right, we looked at this yesterday. The watchman said, morning comes, yet it's also night, right? There's like a non-answer. How long is this going to go on, watchman? The one who is declaring what you've revealed. What's been revealed? He says, well, I know morning's coming. That's been revealed. I just don't know when. It's also night. If you would inquire, and come back again, or it goes, come back, repenting. And that's where we ended yesterday. We went through that, this waiting when the answer feels like a non-answer because it's not what we want to hear. Or the prophet doesn't see yet. The Lord hasn't revealed the when of it. Just that morning is coming. We don't know what is left of the night. So today's passage, we'll read all the way through and then go through it. Verse 13. The burden of Arabia. In the desert brush of Arabia you will stay for the night, you caravans of Dedanites. To him who is thirsty bring water, inhabitants of the land of Tema. Meet the fugitive with food. For they fled from swords, from drawn sword, from bent bow, and distress of war. For thus Adonai said to me, within a year, as with the year of a hired worker, all the glory of Kedar will cease, and the remainder of the number of the archers, the mighty men of the sons of Kedar, will be few. For Adonai, God of Israel, has spoken. Right, so now these verses address another group of Babylon's allies. You know, the references here to Tema, to the Dedanites or Dedan, and then Kedar. These are Arabian places. This is going on within Arabia. So Tema is about 200 miles southeast of Duma in Edom. It's about 200 miles east of the Red Sea, and it was an oasis city and a caravan center on the incense trade route. So caravans of traders were there, and Dedan was another 90 miles southeast of Tema. And so both Tema and Dedan are located in a region known as Kedar, which is in the northwestern part of the Arabian desert. So this, like we've talked about in the last couple of days, this could be hitting issues that were happening in Isaiah's time. In the 8th century, there were things going on, 8th century BCE, or after Isaiah's time in the 6th century BCE. Could be speaking to both, and then obviously having a impact, meaning for something even beyond that. So in the 8th century, you've got the whole Arabian area that was involved in suffering and unrest while the Assyrians were causing their issues. The region of Kedar in the 8th century was paying tribute to Assyria. And in the year 715, Sargon II campaigned against the tribes that were between Tema and the Gulf of Aqaba. And then in 703, the Arabs joined in rebellion with the Babylonian leader Merodach Baladan, another rebellion from Babylon, and then they were subdued by Sennacherib. So that was speaking to what was going on in the region during Isaiah's time. Then you have in the 6th century that the ruler of Babylon Nabonidus, in his self-imposed exile from Babylon in 552, he made Tema his capital. And we don't know exactly why, but it seems like he was looking to get help from the Arabian areas to help him fight back against the Medes and the Persians. Either way, whether it's the 8th century, 6th century, both, the Lord reveals through Isaiah that there's no success in an alliance with Babylon. He says there's no success in an alliance with Egypt, and there's no success in an alliance with Babylon. All of Arabia here is going to experience the crowds of refugees that are running from the defeats of war, from the heaviness of war. So, verse 13 says, the burden of Arabia. In the desert brush. Now, the word desert brush here is actually literally the word ya'ar, which means forest, which there's no forest in Arabia, right? Unless the prophet is being sarcastic. There's no forest here, right? And it doesn't seem that he's being sarcastic. So it has more of the idea of kind of off the beaten path. So this is when you're forced off the roads into the brush. So that's why it's been translated as desert brush instead of forest here. In the desert brush of Arabia, you will stay for the night, you caravans of Dedanites. So you've got these caravans, these traders that are being driven off, forced off the roads into the thickets, into the scrubland, off the beaten track for their own safety's sake. They're hiding. The Dedanites, they were merchants in Arabia. In Ezekiel 27:20, it says, Dedan was your dealer in saddlecloth for riding. In Ezekiel 38:13, it lists Dedan as Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish with all its young lions will say to you, have you come to seize the spoil? So these are merchants in Arabia. And so because of a sudden attack, right, they're merchants that are on the run, and they've got all their stuff with them. But these merchants are going to go off the beaten path, into the thickets of Arabia to hide from the Assyrians, or if it's in the 6th century from from the Medes and the Persians. But the caravans of Dedan are actually southbound. If they're in Tema, they're southbound heading for home. They're still north of Tema, and they've had to flee off the roads, right, away from. So when they leave the roads, they're away from the oases, right? There's no water. Now they're exhausted. They're desperate. So in the next verse, the local residents, the residents of Tema, are called to help them. Verse 14. So let me back up and reread 13. In the desert brush of Arabia, you will stay for the night, you caravans of Dedanites. Now the Lord, through Isaiah, speaks out, to him who is thirsty, bring water, inhabitants of the land of Tema. So he's addressing those who are in the land of Tema, the inhabitants of Tema. Bring water to the thirsty. Meet the fugitive, meet the fleeing one. Come before the fleeing one with bread, with food. Right? So literally the translation would be, meet the thirsty. To meet the thirsty, the inhabitants of the land of Tema brought water with his bread, or the food he needed. They were there to meet the wanderer. So Isaiah is describing a rescue operation. There's a call to rescue. They're going to need to bring water to these fugitives. The people of Tema, again, halfway through Damascus and Mecca, would need to meet the fugitives with bread. And these fugitives, they're fleeing. They're fleeing, we'll see, from both swords and from arrows of intense battle. They're just on the run. Then in the records, Sennacherib, the Assyrian ruler, said that he took 1,000 camels from the queen of the Arabs in 688 BCE, and the Arabs left their tents and fled to an area where there were no feeding or drinking places. So you have that imagery of them fleeing to a place. There's no water, there's no food. So what are they going to do? These ones that are fleeing, I need help. So the residents of Tema, bring me food, bring them water, right? So you'll remember, so you have these fleeing ones. Nadad, excuse me. We saw this language back with the fugitives of Moab. And back in chapter 16, when the Moabites were instructed to flee to Judah. And it said in Isaiah 16, 2 and 3, for like fluttering birds scattered from a nest, so will the daughters of Moab be at the fords of Arnon. Give counsel, execute justice. Cast your shadow like night at noonday. Hide the refugees. Do not betray the fleeing one or the fugitive. Right? So there was the call upon God's people to be that shadow of protection, to be what the Lord had called them to be. And so now the Dedanites are being cared for by their own, right? By those from Tema. They're being given provisions, food and water. But the sustenance is limited. It's going to run out. And they're not going to find security there. They're hiding there. And verse 15 tells us why they were fleeing. It says, because or for they fled, they were fugitives, Nadad, from swords, from drawn swords, right? From swords that were at work, from swords that had been, taken out of their sheaths, from bent bow, and from the distress of war. It's interesting, the word for distress here is the word koved, which is the word for weight, the weight of war, the distress, the difficulty. It's also the word for glory, kavod. It's the same root word, kavod, the weight, the weightiness of war. So the reason that the ones are fleeing, they're fleeing from these merchants, these ones who have the stuff that everybody wants, the stuff that you think you need, all this sustenance, and now they need sustenance, they need food, and they need water, because they're on the run for their lives, and on the run for their lives, what matters now? They're running from drawn swords, they're running from bent bows, they're running from the weight of war, right? They're running from the heat of battle. And so all the things that you depend upon, all the things that it's all meaningless now. Verse 16. Like they think they're running from war. But what we come to find out is that yes, they're running from war. But that this is the what's happening now is in response to the word of the Lord. That these things God has spoken, right? Who are you going to depend upon? You keep depending upon either the warriors or someone to help you fight against the warrior, or you depend upon, you're looking to make an alliance with other nations, or you're depending upon these traders, merchants. When all, one after the other, we're called to depend upon the Lord. And so we see the sovereignty of the Lord. It says, for thus Adonai, and again, it uses the word Adonai, not the name of God here, Yod-He, Vav-He. It uses the word Adonai, meaning the master, the sovereign one. The Lord said to me. So Isaiah doesn't always say it like this, but he makes it clear who said it and where it's coming from and who it was said to. He said it to me, right? And it's in the perfect tense, so it's used not as a reporting a word from the past, but it's expressing this has been said and it's being done. The Lord's mind is settled on this. For thus the Lord has said to me, within a year, as with the years of a hired worker, all the glory, all the kavod, all the glory, all the weight of Kedar will cease. Right? It will be brought to an end is the language. It will be brought to completion. Verse 17, and the remainder of the remnant or the remainder of the number of archers, the mighty men of the sons of Kedar will be few. For Adonai, God of Israel, has spoken. Right? So Kedar, Arabia, is not going to escape the warfare. Right? The word here through Isaiah is that those who've trusted in the nations, those who've trusted in the merchants, those who are looking elsewhere, those trusting in the nations will succumb to those nations. He says basically, hey, within a year, right? It's like counted as precisely as an indentured servant would calculate how much longer he has. Like an indentured servant, I've only got a year left. Within a year, all the glory, all the pomp, all the kavod of the Arabian merchants will have collapsed under the kavod of battle. All of their kavod will be gone under the kavod of war. Within a year, all will be over for Kedar. Right? History will prove that the world cannot solve its own problems. And the glory of Kedar, everything that Kedar gloried in, right? This is pointing to its acquisitions, both the tangible acquisitions and the intangible, the things, the glory when people make a big deal about you, your lifetime significance, your importance, all this thirst for glory that fuels so much of human activity, right? It's crushed under the glory is crushed under the weight of war. Glory achieved apart from the Lord is like stuff that goes up in the flames. He says, within a year, gone. You may have sustenance, right? You may feel like you have security. You may feel like you have glory, but it doesn't last long, right? The only glory in the universe is the Lord's. He's the only one who's truly significant, but his intent is to share his significance freely. He wants his people to depend on him to share in what he has for them. Here again it says, then the remainder of the number of the archers, the mighty men of the sons of Kedar will be few. Why? Why? Because the Lord God of Israel has spoken. Right? The reason for the reduction of Kedar as a power is that the Lord has spoken. That the Lord God of Israel is the only God. Right? He is the one who speaks. This may sound audacious. How can you say everybody else has their own gods? But he is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. He is the God of all gods. These other nations have the gods to whom their destiny is committed. But the prophet says that the God of Israel is the God alone who holds the nations in his hand. Right? Apart from the Lord, the nations in distress, apart from God, they only have, what can they do? They just keep looking for each other to help me out. They have human power to look to, but it all falls short. While Israel has the omnipotent creator on their side. Our only hope for humanity is in the Lord. in his sovereignty. So this chapter 1, or chapter 21, right? These three words speaking to the desert by the sea, right? Speaking to this word of silence, this word in Arabia, they speak to the folly of trusting in human power, in human alliances, the fickleness, right, of human promises. We have to focus on trusting in the Lord. It's so easy. We have to recognize we keep looking, depending upon others for our security, others for our sustenance. And often the promises that are being made are all self-serving, right? The nations are all saying, well, what can you do for me? Is this serve our national interest? Does this serve my interests? What do you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's the way of the world. And in the same way that their promises can be self-serving, when the promises no longer serve them, why are you trusting in them? They're not reliable. The only hope is to look to the Lord, to surrender ourselves, to surrender our self-interest, to stop trusting in the self-interest of others, to stop trusting what others offer to supply. Focus on what God alone can provide, right? Stop trying to supply our own needs out of our own resources and turn instead to trust in the Lord in a genuine self-denying trust, right? If I've come to know that God is infinitely trustworthy, if I've truly laid it down and have abandoned my self-interest into his hands, then I can become trustworthy myself, right? When I'm not fighting for me first, but I say, I trust you, Lord, that you'll take care of me. So I'll seek first your kingdom and your righteousness and trust you to handle the rest. My security, my sustenance, any glory that I would seek, the glory, all of that, the security of this world, the sustenance of this world, the glory of this world, it's gone in a year. It's gone in a minute. But the sustenance the Lord offers is from everlasting to everlasting. The security that he offers is from everlasting to everlasting. The glory that he brings is everlasting. Right? So put your hope in the Lord. Trust in him and him alone. Amen? All right. Well, sorry if I had to rush through that, but may the Lord open our eyes to see him and to trust in him and to wait on him. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.